Hello, everybody. What's up? Welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Liz. Yes, my hair has changed. You're welcome. It's still wet. Don't mind the odd rusty tones. Um, yeah. So today we're going to finish up the Kelly Dae Wilson case. We're going to talk more about the Kerr family sex cult and I kind of just wanted to talk about the lawsuit that was filed by Eugene and Geneva Kerr against people that had them wrongfully convicted. So this case, this case is Eugene and Geneva Kerr versus Roland Scott Lyford. And this includes Ann Gore, Debbie Minshew, Brooks Fleig, and Steve Baggs. And this case basically all in all, this case is about the fact that Eugene and Geneva were wrongfully investigated, arrested, incarcerated for the kidnapping and rape and murder of Kelly Wilson. They sued, as I said, the people above that were involved in the investigation against them that led to their arrest and incarceration. So this case, this suit, they went over everything. So, and that includes them tracing back to November 1990, and this is when Ann Gore, now she was an employee of Department of Human Services in Texas, so TDHS, and she was assigned the case of Loretta and Wendell Kerr, which are the other Kerrs that I talked about in the original video, and their 4 children. And Wendell is actually the son of Eugene and Geneva. So Wendell and Loretta's children are the grandchildren that were first talked about when it came to assault. That's when Loretta went to the police station and told them about what Wendell was doing to their kids, and then she got implicated in it as well. So there were sexual abuse allegations that were made against Wendell Kerr, obviously, like we talked about, and the Kerr grandchildren, or as they're known as the Kerr children, and they were living in foster homes after all of this first came about, and it was Ann Gore's responsibility to meet with the children on a monthly basis. Well, that was in November of 1990. December of 1990, Ann was shown a letter that was addressed to Wendell, written by Lucas Gear, which we talked about, Wanda Gear, or Wanda Gear Hicks, that was her name. Lucas is her brother. So after Wanda divorced her husband James Hicks, she began dating Wendell Kerr, who had recently divorced Loretta. Now, I've already kind of talked about this in a little bit in the last video, but it's just kind of if you haven't watched the first one, you'll kind of understand it a little bit more if I talk about this. So in this letter, Lucas appears to basically apologize to Wendell for sexually abusing one of Wanda's sons. And as a result of this letter, Ann Gore began to counsel Wanda and her 5 children, which after this came out as well, her children were called the Hicks kids or Hicks children. And these weren't the only kids that Ann Gore was counseling. She was also counseling the Kerr children as well. So fast forward to May of 1991. This is when Wendell is indicted on charges of sexually abusing one of his daughters, and it's also when TDHS discovered that Wendell and Wanda married, and they moved in. He moved in with her and her 5 children. Now, there was an emergency removal of these children, and they were placed into 3 different foster homes. This emergency removal was executed by TDHS. So the most troubling part about the placement of these children is that these children were placed in Barbara Bass Therapeutic Foster Homes. And this is when our other defendant, Debbie Minshew, comes into play. Now, Debbie Minshew, she is also involved in like the therapeutic households, and she is a TDHS caseworker. She was assigned to supervise the Bass home. So, once these kids were in these foster homes, the Kerr and Hicks kids began to tell like outlandish and elaborate tales of sexual abuse. They spoke about molestation and sodomy at the hands of their parents and grandparents. This involved also like their grandparents Eugene and Geneva, and also strangers. It was reported that they were coerced into having relations with each of their parents, grandparents, and strangers while they were being videotaped. And they also spoke of blood, the devil, masks, knives, and this all connected to their sexual abuse. So, one of the last things that they spoke about was the murder and dismemberment of babies and children at the hands of their parents and grandparents. So this is what started the Kerr Family Satanic Sex Cult thing. So the Kerr and Hicks kids made these statements on numerous occasions and in a variety of different settings. Now, some of these statements were spontaneous and other were voluntary. Others were like elicited after being vigorously and coercively questioned by people. And these people were using techniques that ended up being highly criticized by Geneva and Eugene. Why do I always mix their names up? Wendell and Eugene. See, I did it again. By the Kerr's lawyer and by CPS. So everything that the caseworkers involved in this case were doing were highly criticized because they weren't handling this case correctly. And one of the reasons why Texas ultimately dropped the case on the Kerrs for child abuse charges is because of the fact that of how Minshew and Gore mishandled the children and their testimony, and it was deemed that their testimony was unworthy and untrustworthy. So the expert witness that the Kerrs had, his name is Dr. Perry, and this doctor explained how child witnesses are impressionable and inappropriate forms of questioning can taint some of their memories and how they recollect them. And this goes hand in hand with how they were coerced. So there was also a medical examination that was done of the children. It did reveal that there was scarring that is consistent with being molested, but this was disputed. The defense experts disputed the charge that Gore and Minshew, that the way that they interrogated these kids and their techniques were improper. Like they thought that it was basically a flaming dumpster fire, that they were trying to throw them under the bus, even though they were trying to do their job, but they weren't doing it in a correct way. So the supervisor of Gore and Minshew, his name is Lloyd Bardwell. This happened in around June of 1992. He asked Baggs to help investigate the Kerr family. And Baggs was an investigator for the Criminal Law Enforcement Division of Texas. And he helped develop the way that you can investigate ritualistic behavior and occult practices. He was huge in this area for this stuff. Like there was videos that any new law enforcement officers had to watch, and he made them. And he would call on Fleeg, which he was a Louisiana peace officer, and he was extremely experienced in the occult and ritually based crime. And he called him to assist him. Now, During the discussions with the children with these men, um, they were convinced of the possibility that the Kerrs did engage in some sort of ritualistic abuse. One of the adults identified by the kids as a participant in their victimization was Lucas Gear, and Lucas Gear was serving time for like violating conditions of his parole. Now, Bags and Fleek interviewed Gear and heard him confess to making a variety of claims of sexual assaults on children and participating in ritualistic murder of babies on the Kerr family property. Now, Lucas also corroborated some of the allegations made by the Kerr and Hicks children implicating the other adults in the Kerr family. This included Eugene and Geneva in their abuse and torture. So, they did make Lucas take a polygraph test, and the polygraph did determine that he was telling the truth in these statements. So, there were other statements made by the Kerr and Hicks children that led defendants to a person with the initials RS. This is a male juvenile who was another alleged victim at the hands of the Kerrs. Now, he basically was a link between the child abuse investigation of the Kerrs and the Kelly Dae Wilson murder. And he would then tell investigators that he witnessed the abduction, rape, and murder of Kelly Dae Wilson. He provided details of these events and said that Wilson's body was kept in a shed in the Kerrs' backyard. Now, when they went to the Kerr family property, and basically what they did is they used infrared technology that was designed to detect heat rays that are emitted from skeletal remains buried underground. And Bags and Fleeg flew over the property and located 2 potential sites, which ended up turning into 3 potential sites after they had a cadaver dog on the property. This was a toolbox containing a blue bag, a red shed, and 3 shallow grave-like depressions in the soil. Now, the red shed showed signs of heavy washing, repainting, and contained a shovel that had blood residue on it. And this was very like, whoa, there's blood. Additionally, the investigation revealed that there was a circular clearing in the woods behind the Kerrs house, and it matched the description given by the children as a place of where the SA had occurred in all of the ritualistic abuse. So in 1993, the Upshur County District Attorney, his name is Tim Cohn, he obtained indictments against the Kerrs along with 4 other family members of the Kerrs, alleging sexual child abuse. Now, he was actually disqualified from prosecuting the indictments because of a prior representation of the Kerr family, so he couldn't do it. Then he asked the state district court in Upshur County to appoint Lyford as a special prosecutor pursuant to the case. Cohn also, he personally appointed Lyford as the ADA of Upshur County. And basically it was the Kerr family was charged with sexual abuse of the children, and Lyford was there to prosecute the child sexual abuse in any criminal or civil lawsuits arising out of any and all incidents related or connected to the SA. So Lyford had served about 2 years as the Travis County DA office chief litigator for the Texas Department of Human Services. And at the time he was appointed a special prosecutor in this case, he was also practicing law at a prominent law firm in Galveston, Texas. So in December of 1993, Lyford reached plea agreements with Wanda Kerr and Connie Martin, who Due to their agreements, they provided, among other things that they provided, evidence that implicated the Kerrs in Kelly Dae Wilson's kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder. And they also identified items removed from the blue bag that was found in the toolbox on the property. And these apparently were instruments for restraints and torture. And Wanda Kerr and Connie Martin also passed lie detector tests in connection with their statements. So Wanda also described how Danny Kerr, now Danny is the other son of Eugene and Geneva Kerr, the brother of Wendell. Wanda described how Danny abducted Wilson as a birthday gift for Geneva Kerr. And Danny had picked her up in his van and took her to the property. This is where she was raped and murdered, and her body would be kept in the red shed on their property. Wanda even retraced the route that Danny took during the abduction. Now, Connie provided a further corroboration of this account of the abduction that was given by Wanda Kerr and RS, the male juvenile. And she also reiterated the stories that the children spoke of the ritualistic sex, torture, and murder, and stated that some of the victims were buried in the backyard of Danny Kerr, and that the bodies were buried in bags of metal and plastic. Now, they did search his backyard, and it did reveal bone fragments in pieces of metal and plastic, but these fragments, so these fragments were identified by forensic analysis to be sub-adult human. So Bags and Fleeg also uncovered 2 devil masks, 2 knives, a bayonet, a blood-stained mattress cover, and a long machete that also belonged to Danny. It's not looking good for him, huh? Connie also stated that the machete was used by Danny to dismember his other victims and several other children that included masks and knives in their description of torture and abuse. One of the masks, which was the devil, fit the description given by the children as being worn during one of these times. Now, Wendell Kerr, a key figure in R.S., Wanda, and Connie's accounts of Kelly Dae Wilson's murder, he provided an alibi that appeared to be legitimate, so he wasn't there. Wendell worked for a trucking company, and he had bills and other receipts showing that he was not in Texas at the time of the events that happened. Now, Lyford thought that somebody substituted for Wendell and gathered the documentation that enabled Wendell to have an alibi. Now, there was also other statements obtained by 3 other adult witnesses not involved in the alleged child abuse, and 2 of these witnesses were adult children of the Kerrs as well. They revealed that revealed to Lyford that they had been abused by Eugene and Geneva while they were growing up. Their accounts of SA mirrored that of the grandchildren, and they signed their statements. The 3rd adult, this was a neighbor of Connie Martin's, and she told the defendants that Connie had revealed to her that Danny, her husband, was abusing her children. And on several occasions, one of Connie's sons gave the neighbor a detailed account that revealed sexual abuse. So in 1994, January of 1994, this is when the Kerrs were indicted of kidnapping, rape, and murder of Kelly Wilson, and they were imprisoned. This is also when everything was like wildfire on the news. Everything spread like wildfire. Like, everybody knew what was happening. Everybody knew that they were in jail. All of this jazz. Now, in March of 94, this is when the Attorney General's office took over the case of the Kerrs, and by 1995, all of the charges were dropped against them. So the Attorney General eventually figured out that the people that investigated this case botched it, and they botched the handling of the matter and made it impossible to proceed with prosecuting this case. So all the charges were dropped. Now, the sole issue of this countersuit that happened a few years after is basically that they were falsely imprisoned, falsely accused, and falsely indicted of child abuse charges. That's why they countersued these people, because they put them in jail under coercion of a child. All of these accounts that were made because somebody coerced them. So I talked about this a little bit in my Kelly Dae Wilson video. They were known to bring their witnesses into the investigation room, like in their interrogation room. That's what it is. So you know how cops have the video in the corner? Well, they would shut it off and they would coerce them and coach them into what they needed to say. That way they could indict these people. And it was the same thing with these foster family homes, the therapeutic homes. They were coaching these kids while they were using the holding method. Now, the holding method, I talked about it in my previous video, so part 1 of this. The holding method is basically a person holds a child and makes them talk about what happened to them. So they have to relive their trauma. You're just further traumatizing this child. Now, when you're forcing a child to talk about something that has never happened to them, you're traumatizing them even more. You're abusing them even more while holding them. So basically, like, child here, they're holding them against them. That's what holding is. And that was deemed unlawful and unjust, and they do not practice it anymore because of all of this. So I went on a little tangent. Sorry. So basically, this countersuit they had, what they wanted to do was they wanted to rectify the situation and get these charges. Like, they didn't want them at all. They sorry. The Kerr family, so Eugene and Geneva, they identified that the different things that Lyford did were unauthorized, fabricated destruction of their home. Basically, when Lyford sent people to search their home, they also destroyed the property too. There was a disclosure of bizarre theories about the family, about the Satanic Sex Cult, that was completely false. Like, this guy did more damage than he tried to actually help, which was a thing. Especially in this time in the United States, there was a lot of things that people tried to do, but they don't realize that there's malicious intent until they realize that they fucked up, which this dude fucked up hardcore. Like, he's the reason why Kelly Dae Wilson's case probably will never be solved. We will probably never find her body because of this case and because of the way that everything was handled. Like, I feel very, very sad for Kelly's family, and at the same time I also do feel bad for the Kerr family as well, and the others that were wrongfully indicted for these charges, because they didn't deserve any of this at all. And especially Kelly's family, they were already going through something, and then to be run through the mud like this, like, it's not right. And especially not even it was also the Texas Department of Human Services that were involved in this, that helped the coercion and corruption of these children, that ended up getting to a point where this case won't be solved because they had an internal fuck up. This is why I also don't like the Department of Health and Human Services, because they mean well, but they don't at the same time. There's always a way that things are running through the cracks. Nothing is being handled the correct way. And unfortunately, this happens everywhere. So that, my friends, is the finishing part of the Kelly Dae Wilson case and the Kerr Family Satanic Sex Cult. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. I really hope that people that are watching this learn something from this, because people don't deserve to be treated the way that they were, like this. Nobody deserves to be treated like this and to be run through the mud and be treated of somebody that abuses their children when they are not. So, again, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in tomorrow's video. Bye, guys.